Well, thank you very much, and let me say thank you to everyone who's come this afternoon. And this is an answer to our Attorney General, Eric Holder, who raised the question early on, are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? So this audience is saying, we are courageous and we can talk about racism. Let me give you a little background. I did my training in psychiatry at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And in the course of being a resident in psychiatry, the patients that I talked to, they had black and white patients at St. Elizabeth's at that time. And the black patients that I talked to, there was always something about racism in history. I'm a third-generation physician. My father was a physician in Chicago. His father was also a physician in Chicago. And I thought, if I'm going to be an effective psychiatrist, for black people, I have to understand racism. What is it? And when I was an undergrad, I thought that I was a Marxist. And I liked Marxian theory to the extent that it attempted to tie everything up. In other words, how to understand broadly. But after attempting to use Marxian theory, solving black people's problems, I said, wait a minute, that doesn't work. I remember going home and my family was sitting around the dining room table and my grandmother was there and I said, I'm a Marxist. And my grandmother said, the more education they get, the dumber they get. But anyway, I wanted to understand racism more in depth. I finished 3 years of residency at St. Elizabeth's, and then I did 2 years of child psychiatry fellowship at Children's Hospital. And I'm still looking for what is racism beyond all the hundreds of books that you read. In 1967, I met a gentleman whose name is Neely Fuller Jr., and his quote is at the bottom of that page. He is a guard at the Bureau of Engraving here in the District of Columbia. He had been writing about racism from the time he was in the Korean War. And sitting on a radar site in Japan, he started thinking about the United States. To make a long story short, he ended up saying and thinking about racism as a total system structure. And I think everybody should get that word clearly in their mind. He said racism is a system, and the system is for the maintaining a power equation of white power over a relative non-white powerlessness. And so talking with him for a long time, and he said that the system was operative in all areas of people's activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. So being a psychiatrist, and I say old school psychiatry, new school psychiatry, is just learn about the chemicals in the brain and learn about the pharmaceuticals that affect it. But old school psychiatry was wondering why behavior is what it is. What is the causative factor of behavior being what it is? So I kept saying, well, why on this planet would this particular power equation be important? And I thought about, and I tell people I was actually standing in my kitchen at 743 Fairmont Street, just up and around the corner. And it just came to me. See, why the power equation of white power over a relative non-white powerlessness? And I thought about some of the things that were said within the culture. I hope we have time because I'll tell you about the importance of ball games and I'll tell you about the importance of guns. I thought about one major aspect of the discussion that would take place, that black people were genetically inferior to people who classified themselves as white. Thought about that. And I thought about the fact that the people of color on this planet are referred to as minorities, whereas in reality, on this planet, the overwhelming majority of people are people of color, black, brown, red, and yellow, 9/10 of the people, and they are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration. If anybody has a question, well, what does that mean? Just look at Barack Obama. Barack Obama is an example of the dominance of the ability to produce the black pigment melanin. His father was black, his mother was white. But because the ability to produce that black pigment is genetically dominant, anytime you mix white plus a color, black, brown, red, or yellow, you're going to get a colored person. And so my brain computer just clicked on and said, that's it. In other words, if the people who classify themselves as white on this planet, and let me just see if we can have a little diagram. I tell people to think about 1492. And Columbus started voyages of European people coming out of Europe and circumnavigating the planet. And I say every place they landed, it was colored people. And if the men on those ships had sexual relations as a part of the hospitality, and it took 9 months for the boats to be repaired, they realized that all of the children looked like the colored mothers. And so I thought, well then what if they thought, what if these guys got in boats and descended on Europe? Because they did have boats. If they decided to take their navigational skills from south to north, and the women were receptive, then white could be genetically annihilated. This was a critical question then, and it's a question now. I say this is the fundamental concern as to why we have the persistence of this problem. If we take the black people's experience in this area of the world, it's, let's say 500 years, there has never been a day, a week, an hour when the practice of white over non-white has not been in play. In economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and marriage. Am I making myself clear so far? Okay. So I said, this is a key. And I've lectured across the country. I've lectured outside of this country. And in talking to people who classify themselves as white, audiences of people, and I say politely, do you want your children to be colored? Do you want your grandchildren to be colored? Do you want your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren to be colored? I'm polite, they're polite. What do they say? It's an exam question class. They say no. So I say, if you mean this, it simply means that you have to do certain things in each of these areas of activity so that this power equation which is a survival power equation, is maintained. Now, once you begin to understand this, there are many things that you can begin to understand that are not talked about. And for example, I say that in, excuse me, in this system, the most difficult thing for anyone to talk about is the issue of racism. I remember applying for a job here in the District of Columbia, working for the city government as a psychiatrist. There was an opening and I applied for a position to work in a clinic that was on Spring Road. And the clinic was staffed by predominantly white people. And so the director said to me, Dr. Welsing, you have an excellent reputation as a psychiatrist, but all of our staff is white. And you talk about racism, and that makes white people uncomfortable. And so I smiled and I said, wait a minute. Here we are in a black community. All of the patients are black. And you tell me I have an excellent reputation, but because I make the staff uncomfortable talking about a critical problem, I can't have the job. Now that wasn't the end of that story. The end of the story was he was forced to give me the job. But the point being that this is the most difficult thing to talk about. The reality of racism and looking at it in depth. I say that there is no one paragraph definition of racism that is more comprehensive than my particular one paragraph statement. I'm the only psychiatrist in the United States who has talked about racism for 40 years. I'm the only psychiatrist in this entire world that has been talking about racism, white supremacy for the last 40 plus years. Now I say this is a tragedy. I wish I had a lot of company. But we don't have a lot of company because people are so frightened and they're so nervous about talking about this critical subject. Now I say that all of the things that we worry about guns. Let me tell you why guns are important. I think we're all grown-ups here.
We have a few children in the room.
There are a few children, that's okay. If there is a fear of genetic annihilation, then the brain computer, you will see in my definition, consciously and or subconsciously determined. If there is a fear of genetic annihilation, the brain computer immediately goes here. Now that's not a man with glasses. Do I need a model? This is male genitalia, right? These are the testicles. The vibration in the room is so sad. This is where the genetic material is stored. Now this is Black History Month. We all know that as a part of American history is that a significant part of the Black history is where black males were lynched and castrated. Is that correct? I mean, everybody did get their history lesson. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes. But you see, people are nervous, right? Okay. Black men were lynched and castrated And often the reason was that they thought about, thinking about, imagining, questioning about having sex with a white female. Is that right? Yes. Mm-hmm. That was usually the motivation. We're doing this because he did this, or he thought about doing this. Until 14 years of age, is supposed to have said something to a white female, and so he was lynched. So I say that, why is the male important? The male is important because females cannot impose sexual intercourse. See, a female can entice, but she cannot impose. If I went to my purse and got a Uzi and I selected a gentleman and I said, you were going to have sex right now, I don't care if that's your wife, and I frightened him, what would happen, gentlemen? See, if the male is frightened, the physiology is just that he would not be able to maintain an erection. So it is the male, if the question and the fear is genetic annihilation, then the attack has to be on the male person, whether it's conscious and or subconsciously determined. Now this is very critical because we are now being told that 70% of black families are what? Single female. And I say that is because of the war that is taking place against black male persons. The graduation levels of black males, even to this day, from high school is very, very low. And if fathers are missing from the homes, then this has a profound impact on the development of male children. But if fathers are unemployed, I heard discussion on the television today, 20% unemployment in a city like Chicago. So if there are not fathers in the home, then we are doing something very critical to male development. But instead of just wondering why, we have to go back to what is fundamentally taking place in the society, in the social system structure that is determining people's behavior. So let's talk about balls. This is some of the most important activity within the culture. Is that right? The day is Super Bowl. The people who are not here watching are soon watching the ball game. Why are ball games important? What are these testicles called colloquially? And what are the two series of balls, class? Huh? Any other answers? See, you're looking at it. You're looking at it all the time. But unless the brain has the context at a conscious level, then you will not see, but you're looking at it all the time. We are told we are in a democracy, and I say we're in a system of racism, white supremacy, a system for white genetic survival. This is the power dynamic that is actually going on. And so what are the two series of ball games within this system structure? If you read the ISIS papers, don't tell. Anybody. See, you're looking at it, but I say you won't see it. The two series of ball games are big brown and small white. Small white balls. Are you with me? What are the big brown balls? Football. Basketball. What are the small white? Ping pong. Golf.
Baseball.
Baseball. See, now I say that this is absolutely fascinating. This is not coming from Francis Welsing's brain computer. This is what the culture is turning out, you can say at the subconscious level, to address the fear of white genetic annihilation. And this is concern about balls. Ball games occupy more people's attention than church. See, every season has a ball game, and there's a lot of flurry and activity going on about balls. In the same culture, what do females, white females, say is their ideal mate? Speak up, class. Tall, dark, and handsome. So then all we have to do is look and see where these big brown balls go. Are you ready? Okay, the football goes into some white upright legs at the end of the field. The basketball goes into a white net. And then there are usually white females in short skirts dancing on the side. Black girls can hardly get on the squat. Are you all with me? See, now this is discussion that is going on at the symbolic level 24/7. 24/7. Let's look at the small white balls. Now, a white gentleman said to me, Dr. Welsing, do you know what white men say? And I said, no, I don't. He said, white men say they're not males. They're not men until when? Okay, see? Until they have had sex with a black female. Thomas Jefferson comes. Okay. So the most powerful white men play what game? Golf. And how is that game played? Long stick held between legs. Trying to get a small white ball into a hole where? In black Mother Earth. Look, we can also do smoking objects because I said this is the key. This is the fundamental concern that is going on in a culture that is concerned about its genetic survival. So these are the balls, and in psychiatry, and Sigmund Freud would say that the penis is a phallic symbol. And smoking objects are phallic symbols. And so they also fall into two categories in this culture mix. And so we have big brown smoking objects, and what are those class? Cigars, pipes. Is there more cigarettes? And what are small white? Cigarettes. And what are cigarettes called in the dictionary? Fags.
Thanks.
This is an English language. This is not Francis Welsing. This is what is going on in the culture. So when white males have a son, do they pass out cigarettes or cigars? You see, as a statement about masculinity. What does Rush Limbaugh smoke? A 12-inch cigar. Okay. So guns. Everybody is lamenting about gun control. Why can't we have gun control? The fundamental question is, what do guns actually represent? I said, this is the key. This is a front view of male genitalia. This is a lateral view. If you turn it around 90 degrees, you have this. What is this? A gun. And what is the gun called, class? The great, what class? Equalizer. Meaning, consciously or subconsciously, the black male is looked at. He has weapons, can annihilate me, must create weapons, can do same thing. And that becomes a gun. So if someone talks about taking the gun away, when there is the fear that is not discussed of genetic annihilation, then the gun cannot be taken away, and especially it cannot be taken away by a black man in the White House. Are you all with me? See, I sit in my office talking to patients, and the job of the psychiatrist, at least as I said, old school. New school is see the patient 15 minutes, assess whether they're depressed or anxious, and write a prescription. Not use your training to help people understand why their behavior might be what it is. Now, my purpose in talking about racism is not hate white people. That's cheap. That is cheap to spend energy on this planet hating anybody. The goal objective would be to replace a system of racism, white supremacy, which is injustice, with a system of justice. Justice being no one is mistreated. No one is allowed to be mistreated. And those who need the most help get the most help. But if people are feeling genetically inadequate, then they have to see people looking inferior. They have to see people in poverty. And they have to engage in greed. In other words, if I feel inadequate, I have to have everything. I have to have all the oil, all the gold, all the diamonds, everything. So the things that we are troubled by in the culture, if we really indeed wanted to take our courage to deeper levels, then we would have to look at levels of reality that people don't want to talk about. see the Attorney General, Eric Holder, said our nation of cowards. The president even took office saying we needed to have dialogue about race. And both of these gentlemen have been silent. There's no discussion about racism. No discussion. I mean, yes, people talk about race, but they don't go into any depth. So let's look at the necessary color code for maintaining white genetic survival. Many people in the audience will be familiar with the color code, but not thinking about it in these terms. If you are black, what class?
Get back.
Get back. If you are brown,
Stick around.
stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow. And if you are white,
All right.
now see, black people learn this. They learn it on the day of birth. When the family goes to look at the baby in the bassinet, the new baby. And I'm sure it's true for all people of color. It's true in Central America. It's true in South America. It's true in Asia. Because all of the people of color who have been exposed to white domination end up practicing the color code, no matter what language they talk about it in. I can be in London and the audience is able to respond, just as you have responded. Now, what does this relate to? The genetic ability to produce the black pigment melanin. If you have a lot, your skin is crystal black. A little bit less, it looks brown. A little bit less, so-called red. A little bit less, so-called yellow. And white, you're all right. So where do people take classes in maintaining racism and white supremacy? Does anybody in the audience know where you go to take a class?
Dr. Wilson?
Just turn on your television. No, just turn on your television. See, if you turn on your television, let's say you can turn it on at 4:30 in the morning, or 6 o'clock in the morning, or 8 o'clock in the morning. And you're going to see white. Maybe you'll see a commercial with a black man acting stupid. And then you see white. And then you see a commercial with an overweight black woman. White. Are you all with me? So then you go to school and you open a textbook, or you open any magazine, or you open any newspaper. You are getting the message about what the culture is really all about. And people are behaving based on what they are being programmed to think. Let's talk about suntan. See, while black people are being taught to have skin pigmentation means that you're ugly, that the more color you have, the uglier you are, then across town or across the track, what are people attempting to do? Get a suntan. Get a suntan. I was the only black girl in my class in college. And I remember the first spring, and I still had on jeans and a jacket. In Ohio, I was cold, but the sun was shining. and I saw all of these white bodies on the lawn. And I actually said, what are they doing? But the first time people were attempting to get a tan, while telling people across the track that if they already had it, they were ugly. Now I advise people to read about Nazi Germany. My graduation present from college in 1957, my parents said, what do you want for graduation? And maybe I needed a psychiatrist. But I said, send me to Germany. Now my parents are really hip, aware people, very political people. They would teach us, take us to hear Du Bois, take us to hear Paul Robeson, always political dialogue going on in the house. And my parents didn't say, what? They said, fine. I said, I want to go to Germany. And this was 12 years after the war. And I want to live with German people. And I want to ask them in person, did they know what they were allowing or had allowed to happen to their neighbors? And I was in a work camp outside of Frankfurt. Of course, the only black one there, the Frankfurter Allgemeine did an article, Brown Francis from Chicago is here. Auf Deutsch. But there were young German people who were walking around with swastikas on. And so if I saw them and I would say, don't do that, and they would say, I'm sure they did it. And if I wasn't around, they would start the same thing, doing it again. So if you read Adolf Hitler's work, Hitler said that he wasn't interested in the religion of the Jewish people. He said they were not white. And he was going to kill 11 million because they were not white. Now the German people that I was in this camp outside of Frankfurt, I saw nice people. Some of them, Francis, come and live in our house. But I realized, because sometimes I wonder in later years, should I have told my parents, give me a car? But that was a very important experience for me because people who on the surface could be nice, but they could stand by and observe other people being destroyed. So that was a very important kind of lesson. We can even think about gentrification going on here because Hitler was removing Semites of the Jewish religion to some place where there would be jobs and housing. But we are sitting in this nation's capital and watching the removal of black people take place. And you would be surprised how many black people start saying, now I know how the Native Americans felt. Because black people are being systematically removed. You see, and somehow, at some level, and this is why, we have so-called news programs where people are doing more laughing than thinking and talking. You see, so they don't really have to talk in substance about what is actually taking place. But people need to be aware. See, if I could go back in time, let's say to 1933, or 1937, or 1939, and I was in Austria or Germany and talking to Sigmund Freud, I would say, why don't you talk about anti-Semitism instead of sex repression? You're spending a whole lot of time talking about sex repression, but what are the people actually experiencing? They were experiencing images in magazines. They didn't have TV, of course. Images in movies, images in newspapers, negative images of Semites of the Jewish religion. The word Hitler used was Tier Mensch, animal people, subhuman. And some of this is some of the imaging. And I say that many of the Semites of the Jewish religion, I probably have 500 books on what happened in Germany in my library. Because what did Santayana say? Those who do not learn from history will repeat history. So I have in my institute, I tell people, repeat after me, reading. Repeat after me. Reading is more important. Than watching TV. Let me repeat. Reading is more important. Than watching TV. Let me see what else. Valentine's Day is this month, right? And in this culture, what do white ladies want for Valentine's Day? Maybe kisses, chocolate with nuts. Mr. Goodwill. Is that right? See, people who want chocolate kisses will then say, "You trying to rape me?" The contradictions when people do not deal at the level of truth. And this is what we are challenged to do. Let me just share with you, and then
We'll take some questions.
we'll have time for questions. I think I have 15 minutes. I wonder why is the word motherfucker used so often by black people? Now, my mother, bless her, was a retired Chicago public school teacher. And so she heard that I said this word. And my mother called on the phone. And she said, "Francis?" I said, "Yes, Mom." "Francis, I heard that you said that word in public." And I said, "Mother, what word?" Well, you know, I was mystified. And she said, "You know." And I said, "Mom, I don't. Please help me. I don't know." She said, "Maryland Farmers." And I said, "Oh, okay, Mom, I did say it, but don't worry. It's a political expression." And she said something, "Well, France is real." Anyway, I came out of the clinic on Spring Road, 1125 Spring Road, used to be the Area B Community Mental Health Center. And young black people were passing, and and I thought, oh my goodness, the poor young people, why? And then it occurred to me, any term that is used with supremacy in a culture has significance. What is the significance? And so then we have to always go back to the context. And the context is what, class? Some people are going to have to repeat. Racism, white supremacy. White power over relative non-white powerlessness. And so my brain computer said, oh wow, okay. There are 5 people categories. Man, woman, boy, girl, and baby. Now speaking to black people, who is the man? And white people, who is the man? I say, here comes the man you all. Who am I talking about?
The white male.
The white man. So that means this is an isolating article. Any other male has 4 choices: woman, boy, girl, baby. This is Black History Month. Black men fought historically. Don't call me a little boy, right? There are black men who died trying to say, don't call me no boy. So they said, fine, boy, right? So you got woman, girl, and baby. Until recently, woman and girl was up. Until recently. How many black women can call a black man baby? Tell the truth and shame the devil. You won't get free lying to yourself if you're not lying to me. Okay? So how many black men call a woman they sleep with mama? No truth from them. Hey, mama, can I ride with you? If I ever heard that. See, don't be afraid. Truth makes you strong. It doesn't make you weak. And how many black men call the place where they sleep a crib? One strong man. 2 strong men. So the brain computer simply says, man who calls another man the man. It's called baby, calls woman he sleeps with mama, calls the place where he sleeps a crib. Will do the math. Call himself a motherfucker. Are you with me, class? So what does this term mean? Baby compared to man in terms of power is what? Can a baby knock down a man? So the baby is powerless compared to a man. This is just talking about the culture that we are afraid to talk about. Are you all with me? See, that would be just like in Nazi Germany for a Semite of the Jewish religion to say, oh, he can't do anything to me. Are you all with me?
Can I ask you to hold the mic up?
Yes, I'll try. So I said, this term to mean powerless. Maybe there's another male in the culture who feels powerless in spite of power. How many people are aware that black people are the mothers and fathers of everybody on the planet? Black people are the only people that can produce all of the colors. Crystal black, and then you produce a mutation to albinism, that's white. And you mix the two and you get all of the colors in the middle. all of the different shades. White people can only produce white people. So human life began in Africa. Black men and black women are the mothers and fathers of everybody on the planet. And I say that people who classify themselves as white pay tribute to that family connection when they want to have Uncle Ben's rice and Jemima's pancakes. It might even be why Oprah was so popular. I mean, she's a brilliant woman, but her program was embracing white people and say, tell me what your problem is. Tell me. So I say when white males who have already stated they don't feel like they're men unless they've had sexual relations with a black woman, but when they have a relationship with a black woman, the children, he is genetically annihilated, and the children are colored. So he feels genetically powerless. Are you with me? And then he imposes political powerlessness on the black collectors and black men in particular. Now, class, I can go on for 4 hours. Let me have you ask questions.
What I'd like to do
Yes.
is give you the diagram.
Thank you. Okay, I have the wireless mic, so I'm going to come around for those, and if you just raise your hand up, then I can come to you with the mic, and I'm going to ask everybody to keep their statements in the form of a question, rather than to make a statement or to take on the lecture role of Dr. Welsing. I'm going to ask you to please keep your time at the mic in the form of a question. All right?
Now, my mic is not working. Yeah, it's on. It should be. Oh, got it.
Good evening, Dr. Welsing. I heard you on a radio talk show back in the 90s, and you stated that white men don't steal from black men. I'd like to get your...
That's what I'm saying.
You said white men don't steal from black men. And I also wanted to know, in your interpretation, is there a difference between white supremacy and racism?
Let me just say first, I don't remember saying white men don't steal from, that black men don't steal from white men.
No, white men don't steal from... White men don't steal from black men.
Right now, I'm not connected. I'm not, it's exactly what that means, but I say racism is white supremacy. In other words, let's say, God forbid, a black person said, I hate white people. That's just somebody making a statement. It goes into the air. The black person doesn't have the power to control over what happens in the lives of white people. So that the power is in the hands of people who classify themselves as white on the planet at this point in time. They have more weapons than anybody else. You see, other people may have some weapons, but the question becomes who has most weapons? Who can cause the loss of most life at any given point in time? So I say racism that I'm talking about is white supremacy. Yes.
Dr. Welsing, I want to congratulate you for beautiful service that you've done in the community. My question is in reference to the movie Django, and what do you feel about the cultural condition of the N-word and also the usage of the gun?
I knew that was going to come up. And the question, did you see the movie? No, I haven't seen it, and I'm not going to see it, but I'm not telling anybody else not to see it. I say that for the movie to have used the word nigger, which is, go to your dictionary, it is a demeaning term, a degrading term. That is the message. You see, that you can use this term. Now, whether it was done consciously and or subconsciously, the use of this word, you got a black president, but it's an effect saying that doesn't mean a thing. That this is the word that is meaning something, even though you have many young people, many young people and older people who say, oh, this doesn't mean anything. This is entertainment. Remember, I said the system of racism, white supremacy is practiced in economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And so if a person just doesn't understand system, they're just going to the movie in the abstract. It would be like a person in Nazi Germany who didn't understand system of white supremacy then, and when they see degraded images of Semites of the Jewish religion, they say, oh, that doesn't mean anything. They had to find out later that it had major meaning. See, black people are being pushed out of urban centers all across the country. Inferior schools, inferior housing, homelessness. So to say that the word doesn't have meaning, the word has meaning to the majority of the people who read.
I acknowledge that books are better than TV, but I did see a TV program a couple of days ago on the History Channel, the first day of February, Black History Month. And it was about the history of the Ku Klux Klan. And they chronicled 4 different surges of the Ku Klux Klan over the past century or so. And it struck me that everything they were saying about the Klan and its rise and fall would seem to apply today to the Tea Party and the National Rifle Association. Do you see those phenomena as being part of the same sort of surge of racism?
Well, see, mind you, I'm saying that we are in, see, the system, the total system is racism, white supremacy. And so we have a political party structure that we refer to as conservative and liberal. But we're talking about the system. So we have people who are conserving, interested in maintaining this system. And we have people who are more liberal. They have black friends. They're more liberal about the system. And I say in football game in the system of racism, between team conservative and team liberal, what role do the black people play? They're in football. You see, so Klan, if anybody is familiar with the newsletter or journal that comes out from the Southern Poverty Law Center, if you're not familiar with it, go on the internet and read, where they monitor the number of conservative groups, conservative, extremely conservative. You see, but within this same system, you might have people complaining about the guns who are maybe more over here. But you don't have anybody saying stop the system of racism, white supremacy. You see, and for all the people, I advocate all the people who are in bed with white people, all the white people who are in bed with colored people. Why don't they have an organization? Stop white supremacy. But we don't have that. There's one John Brown. Yes.
Dr. Welsing, thank you for coming tonight. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to hear you. You talk a lot about racism in a patriarchal context and the effect that it has on black men, but what was absent was the effect that white male racism has on black women. Specifically, I'm referring to a comment that you made about the purpose of your work being so that no one is mistreated, because that's an injustice on everyone. But the only reference you made to black women was that 70% of black families were headed by single mothers. How do you reconcile imposing what sounds like a white male patriarchal context on the backs of black women that are working hard to maintain our kinships as they currently are in today's society?
Okay, first and foremost, I tell people this. There's not a person in this room that is now 50% male and 50% female. We are a combination of genetic contributions from mothers and fathers. If I'm given a limited amount of time to speak, I'm trying to cut to what is critical. Racism is a war against black people in general, but black male persons in particular. Now, to the extent that the system is effective in destroying black men, it has put black males and black females in a state of genocide. So we are all impacted together, but if you have a limited amount of time to speak, you do triage. And you talk about the most critical issue. Because if I talk about what's happening to black men, I'm talking to every black woman about her son and what's happening to her son. So let me also say this, that when a minority wants to establish and maintain power, it divides and conquers. You see, so you have the 1/10 dividing the 9/10 into all kind of fractions that fight each other. See, there's not a commercial on television where you see, the only place you see in the media a black man looking with respect at a black female and vice versa. It's when we see Barack Obama looking at Michelle Obama and they are together holding their children. Otherwise, the commercials have a black woman looking at a black man like he's crazy. They're making all kinds of mistakes, whether it's a package being delivered or some kind of insurance. You see, so divide and conquer is critical. And let me just say this, that if the white population on the planet is 1/10, are they genetically superior in terms of intelligence, the fact that they are able to control and hold down the 9/10? Or have they been able to teach the 9/10 to hate themselves so that this majority is broken down and is in support of the 1/10? And those are all the people in Asia and Africa, Central America, and South America who hate themselves because they're colored. You see, and want to bleach their skin. And if I had 3 pills that can go on eBay, the first pill you take on Monday morning with water, it'll allow you to turn white. The second pill you take on Tuesday with a half a glass of and it'll give you long, straight hair. The third pill you take on Wednesday with a glass and a half of water, and it'll allow you to have so-called white features. Now, I'll be wealthier than Bill Gates in 5 days, because the majority of people of color, whether they're in Asia, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in South America, Central America, here, North America, have all at very deep levels been taught to hate themselves. And you can do magic work if you tell people that God is white. See, think about that. God is white, so all of the non-white people on the planet who say that they're Christians, and I'm baptized Baptist and Christian AME, baptized under the water. But the truth is that that is a religious system to uphold the system of racism and white supremacy. And even Billy Graham said Jesus could not, if he came from that part of the world, and if he was a historic figure, he couldn't have been white. You see, but it's critical to have people of color praying to the image of the people who oppress them. You see, whether they're gods or whether they're angels. And I do hope this lecture has not been about hate, it's been about let us all try to rise to the level of courage to talk about truth, so that a critical problem that exists on this planet has the potential to be solved. Any problem that people can perceive, if they decide that they're going to work on it, they can solve that problem. Thank you. Was there another question? Oh, okay.
First, do you still hold the lectures at Howard University on the third Thursday?
Yes, second Thursday of every month, 7 to 10 p.m. in Blackburn Center. It's free and form.
Okay. And my question, it's kind of a little long, so bear with me.
Make it short.
I got you. All right. Well, as long as the concept of race exists, which is a system used to oppress different people of the, or different colored people of the world, how do you propose we eliminate the theory and concept of racism, as long as there are people who are willing to die to keep the system going without an all-out war between the 110 and the 910?
Well, I tell people, and I said at my institute, that self-respect is the most powerful weapon in the world. There's no nuclear device that is more powerful than self-respect. You see, and self-respect has an impact on people in spite of themselves. And so I say that we need a critical mass of people of color and anybody who classifies himself or herself as white. See, white people just need to tell the truth that they know. Many white people have said, Dr. Welsing, how can I help? And I said, the way you can help is tell black people what white people talk about when there's no black people around. Now, white female professor at American University, I have been invited to speak at Lorton Prison, and I talked to the black prisoners, they were mostly black, about racism, and we were driving home, and she said, Dr. Welsing, I hate to admit it, this is an American University professor. She said, I hate to admit it, but when white people are in a social situation and there are no black people around, She said, Dr. Welsing, we are talking negatively about black people. And I told her that I understood that that is simply talking code for white genetic survival. But if a white person says, how can I help? Then tell black people what white people talk about. If somebody wants to help. You see, because the secrets are the things that are not said to black people. It's like Nazi Germany. Nobody was going to tell the Semites of the Jewish religion, look you guys, this is what's about to happen to you next. But people were socializing and, going in and out of stores and neighborhoods, etc. But nobody was telling. And I say that Holocaust Memorial Museum is the most important museum on the mall. Because for everybody who says that, oh, that's conspiracy thinking, that Dr. Welsing, hey, that's a whole museum that is devoted to a governmental conspiracy to destroy people that they said were not white. So it wasn't just the Semites of the Jewish religion. There were the offspring of African soldiers and German women. And guess what? Hitler started out destroying the German homosexuals, putting pink triangles on them, and then putting yellow stars on the people who were Semites of the Jewish religion. But that museum, see, and I would say if Semites of the Jewish religion asked me a question, I'd say stop calling it Holocaust and call it a museum about the dynamics of the system of racism, white supremacy, where people sat down. There was a conference outside of Berlin called the Wannsee Conference, where they sat down, governmental officials, and assigning responsibilities. Who was going to do this and who was going to do this with the goal objective of killing 11 million. Calm, nice, beautiful villa. People eating sandwiches and tea. Talking about how many. See, there are discussions that are going on about, black people used to talk about the plan. The removal of black people from the District of Columbia. And people would say, oh no, you black people are paranoid. One of my white colleagues was psychiatry. I gave a talk at St. Elizabeth Hospital talking about racism some years ago. So at the end, same kind of discussion I'm having with you. So my white colleague went to the microphone and he said, you're paranoid. And I just smiled. And so then a black person in the audience got up and said, he said you were paranoid. And I said, he just paid me a compliment. He said that I understood racism. Okay. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to thank you for coming to speak with us. I wanted to ask you a question specifically about the white biological racial fear of being annihilated. And I was thinking about it, and hopefully I can kind of communicate and you can help answer my question. Isn't there like a beginning premise of identity that has to do with this? For example, Barack Obama you were talking about is an example of a white person has a child with a black person and the child will not be white, but at the same time the child is not African. And it kind of depends on your social perspective. If you went to Brazil and you said that Barack Obama was the first black president of the United States, they wouldn't know what you were talking about because he's not black in Brazil. So isn't there a fundamental question of identity that comes even before we can talk about what team am I on? Am I afraid of being annihilated?
Well, let me just say this. every banker, or you walk into a bank to get a loan, the banker doesn't scratch his head and say, is this a colored person? Now, you may have some societies where you have more of a mixture of African and European and Indian. And so they have 260 different categories that they class people in. But they have one category at the top that they don't mess with, and that's called white. You see, and so you divide up people and you say, oh no, he's not, you know, I heard on television one of the newscasters saying something about he was light power. You see, because there's an effort being made in Soledad O'Brien, who's black in America. All of these colors translate into people of color. So if Barack Obama decided to walk out one afternoon onto, what, shall we say, 15th Street and try to get a cab, there's no question about who's colored. Do you see? And the people who classify themselves in one way in Brazil, let them stop here. Do you see? And the white people even have a fancy term for real white. What is it? Non-Hispanic white. That means real white people. Meaning that some of you colored people want to be white. I like it that way. Because it's going to be a whole color struggle because the whites are becoming a minority. So if they can get into the brain circuits of a lot of colored people, you know, like I've said many times, the white person fills out their census form, they check white. The black person, well, I think now, somebody told me my great-grandma was German. Let me see. And I think the slave master, he was from Ireland. That's all the colored people trying to be everything but who they are, getting an A+ and a lack of self-respect. Because that's what the system of white supremacy teaches. See, the system is even calculating. Now, under slavery, where the white slave master was raping the African woman, and so no matter what shade the baby came out, it was nursing on a black breast. But now we can have another kind where the white female has relationships with a black man and the first breast in the mouth is white. That's another mentality. Because the black mother says, you're black. This is what Soledad O'Brien said her mother told her. You're black. The white mother under white supremacy says, you're not black. So that's going to be a schizophrenic. Because that child is black. Somebody brought me a magazine article about all the movie stars who are adopting little black children. Now what about when that child, the male child, is 13 or 14? He's growing up all around these white people. But let him make the wrong approach to a white female child. He might be at school. What's going to happen to him? Because nobody is talking about racism, white supremacy. It's being denied.
Okay, any other
Yes.
questions?
One
Yes,
last. Can you say something about the DREAM Act?
About
The DREAM Act and its effect on our community?
The DREAM Act, I don't know what the DREAM Act is.
It's the act that allows 11 million Latinos to become citizens immediately.
Well, see, I don't have anything against the non-white people who are being allowed to come into this country. This is an act of white supremacy. You see, in other words, the fear of white genetic annihilation, I gave you the color code. If you're black, get right, brown, stick around, yellow, mellow, white, right. So people who are a lighter shade on the color scale make people feel less nervous. Do you see? So you say it's illegal, but you actually are bringing them in to be a buffer between the white and the black. And then if you are successful in teaching the buffer, you are better than black. You're better. And so we're going to give you all the construction jobs. And we're going to, make certain that you get whatever. But the war is not against people of color. You got to see where the problem is. You see, and those people who classify themselves as white, who say they're not racist, they don't want to be racist, then take responsibility and stop the white people. You have more power than any non-white people. And so if the white people will address the white people who are doing these things, and if the non-white people decide they're not going to fall into the problem of hating each other along with hating themselves, then we have a chance for a better world. Thank you.
We have two more questions, and then this gentleman here.
As a psychiatrist, I think you've made some very intriguing selections of examples of power relationships in ways that I found intriguing. On the other hand, your example of Nazi Germany, I found counter to the idea of racial annihilation. I mean, even though Hitler talked about race and actually borrowed many concepts from America, in doing that, most of the Jews in Germany, I thought, were white. And so for him to choose that group to scapegoat for the economic problems that Germany was facing, I don't think is a good example of so I'm wondering whether Marxism wouldn't be a better theory for explaining that particular conflict and the abolitionist movement in the United States. The best explanation for how it evolved as the abolitionist, the series that was on PBS recently, I think you saw many other kinds of explanations for where abolitionists came from. Why do you think it really has to do with the preservation of racial continuation? I don't understand that.
Well, let me just start with this. There are many black people that look just like you. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, if you have miscegenation over time, then there are people who, let's say black people who are the products of miscegenation who pass for white. Do you see, it would be interesting if they start genetic testing and find out how many white people actually have African ancestors. You see, but Hitler said, no, I want to know who your grandparents are, because you look like you could be white. But I want to know who your grandparents and your great-grandparents are. Because if I want to stay white, I can't have little genes from Africa and the Middle East piling up in my white population. You see, I was talking to a teacher from Scandinavia who was here some years ago, and she said, Dr. Welsing, in Scandinavia, we don't consider the Jews or the Italians to be white people. You see, so according to Hitler's measurement he wanted Europe to be pure. That same struggle is going on in Europe right now, talking about people from, using the religion, but they really are talking about genetics. We don't want these people from the Middle East piling up in Europe and changing the face of Europe. You see, so now talking about abolition, what did Lincoln say about black people? I'm going to free them, but they cannot be the equals of white people. See, figure this. You have millions of slaves, Africans, enslaved Africans. So they were being brutalized and all of that. And so then Lincoln comes along to save the Union. And he says, I've got to do this tactically to break the back of the South in the secessionist states. Hey, we can't have them be the equals of white people, because guess what would happen? Now, Lincoln didn't say this. See, I think Lincoln himself was mixed race. His mother, Nancy Hanks, might have been a Melungeon, meaning those people who were in the hills who were all mixed up, which is why he looked swarthy and had all that stiff hair. Okay. But imagine what would happen if everybody was made equal. That means that black people and white people would be mingling